Welcome into Warchant TV. This is Ira Schofel, managing editor of Warchant.com, and I'm joined by R.J. Young, a name and college football writer with FoxSports.com, who some Florida State fans may have been familiar with before, may not have been familiar with before this week, but I think he's a name people are getting familiar with now because you put out your RJ's way too early top 25 for the 2021 football season, and you got some attention from Florida State fans because you have the Noles in the top 25, coming off of a 3-6 season. So that made you popular with the fan base in Tallahassee. So glad to have you with me, RJ. I wanted to talk about that, talk about your views on college football and the Noles, and thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Ira. Thanks so much for having me here, man. I've been reading Warchant for longer than I would like to admit, lurking on board from time to time. So it's very cool for me to be here on Warchant TV with you. I didn't think it was that controversial to put Florida State at number 25. I mean, I was going back and forth with some other options there, but it made the most sense to me because it's become transfer you east in recent days and recent weeks. And I really love the additions of guys like Jermaine Johnson out of Georgia, #1 junior college recruit 2019. I love the addition of Mackenzie Milton because if he plays like he did in 2017 or even 2018 for that matter, that changes you. And I think that's one of the reasons that I love them at 25. You're always going to get dudes at Florida State, right? But if you can add DJ Williams to the mix and Jermaine Johnson on that side, I believe Jamie Robertson, do I have that right, out of South Carolina? Yeah,
correct.
Like they're getting good in a hurry. And building through the transfer portal is controversial for some. But if you want to win and you got Clemson on the schedule, you got to do something to get good in a hurry. So that was the reason that I thought it was a good place for them to start. And there are a couple of games in there where they'll have to prove it. Obviously, Clemson later, but Notre Dame early in the season. And we're going to figure out a lot about both the Noles and the Irish and so many others. But Norvell in year 2 is also, I think, what I'm really betting on there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, we talked a little bit off the air. You're familiar with Florida State as a program, having grown up part of your youth in the state of Florida. But you also got to know Mike Norvell when you were at Tulsa. You did your undergrad at Tulsa. You did some journalism in that area. And Mike Norvell was a young I don't know if he's a graduate assistant at Tulsa. He might have been a GA at Tulsa, but he's on the staff there. You got to know him there and you followed his career. So that's part of your decision. It's not just the players they added or what they were returning, but also kind of a vote of confidence for Mike Norvell.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he was a GA when I was an undergrad. I'm not that much younger than him, but I was just young enough to know about him at Central Arkansas because anytime you break records, we get to know about you. And then, that photo of him in the cornrows made the rounds so much so that we were teasing him about it at TU. But also watching some of the offensive guys that came through my alma mater, among them Gus Malzahn, Chad Morris, him coming out of that tree. And then what he did in Memphis with Ryan Silverfield, I was really enthusiastic about them in 2018. And I see no reason not to be enthusiastic about them now because I think he's building toward the same sort of magic year where they're going to become, if not a contender for the ACC title, very much in that same place that North Carolina was in this year, because I think North Carolina was actually a year ahead. And this is where I expect Florida State to be, right there competing for a New Year's Six bowl berth if things fall the way I think they should.
Yeah, and I think the note you made about the transfers is it's not just that they're bringing in depth. I think last year, Florida State brought in a lot of transfers last year, but it was a lot of guys that provided depth. These are guys who have been starters at SEC schools. As you mentioned, Jamie Robinson started for 2 years at South Carolina. Keir Thomas, defensive lineman, started for 3 years at South Carolina. Jermaine Johnson wasn't a starter at Georgia, but he was one of their top sack guys, kind of a situational pass rusher. And then Mackenzie Milton, I think at the end of the day, do you think he's kind of I'm not going to say he makes or breaks Florida State season, but, if you have him, if he's anything close to what he was, and I think he said he's about 90% full speed, if he's anything close to that, you look at these teams around the country, quarterback is such an important position, and Florida State has not had really good quarterback play consistently in several years. That kind of goes along with the downturn of the program. That to me, he kind of, I don't say makes or breaks it, but he might be the difference between them finishing as a top 25 team and maybe not being close to a top 25. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, I mean, you nailed it, right? Like with the quarterback play, Florida State's winning national championships.
Right.
When you get quarterback play back, they're going to be back in that space once again. And college football, even more than the NFL, is dependent upon great quarterback play because you can do so much else and they can make up for so many deficiencies that you might have either with their legs or with their ability just to read coverage at a very high level. You give them a couple of weapons around, you need them, right? And I think you're going to see that with Mackenzie Milton. The way that he was able to move through his progressions was Heisman level in 2017, right? He didn't have to do it running around. He could do it by passing for 4,000 yards. If he's close to that guy, yeah. But if he's not that guy, I also think you're going to be in a good spot because he's an older dude. He knows how this can go. He's going to be able to talk guys into trusting him in a way that, quite frankly, I think you're going to need to do at FSU this year, right? I mean, you mentioned it, right? Won 3 games last year. It wasn't a lot of fun. There's a lot of COVID talk, and there was a lot of COVID to deal with. This year, you get to turn the page and start something new. And I think Norvell having a guy that he handpicked himself, even as a transfer, is going to make all the difference in the world because your quarterback is your de facto leader, and Mackenzie Milton is an outstanding leader.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think that's a great point as well. Last thing, while I have you with us, since you do cover college football and you pay attention to college football as a whole, there's a lot of talk right now. Another Final Four with Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State. And, you know, it's just the same characters every year. I think there's some people wondering if Clemson is starting to show some chinks in the armor based on how poorly, you know, they played in their playoff game. Do you see, and Alabama, I guess, 4 of their big-time guys declared for the NFL draft. Do you see those guys possibly coming back to the pack? Or how big of a concern do you have as a college football fan and observer that, you know, that's going to continue where you just have that power structure that no other schools can really break into?
See, this is an interesting conversation, and one I love having with a person like you, Ira, who's been covering the sport longer than I have, as long as I've been around. And you remember Miami, Florida State, Florida. Those would have been your playoff teams at the turn of the century, right?
Right. Yeah.
Clemson, nobody ever heard of them, cared, right? Oklahoma was just on its way back, just on its way. Alabama was a laughingstock. Like, we made jokes about Alabama. So in that way, I think this is all cyclical. But what I do think is important, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, even Notre Dame have been recruiting at a very high level. Those other 3 more than Notre Dame, but you get the point there. Plus, Clemson's going to return, I believe, all 11 guys on defense, which is ridiculous. And Uwe Ungalale is a true talent. They're going to need depth at running back. They're going to need depth at wide receiver. I don't see it so much as them falling back. I see it as these pockets of space where you can make up some ground because their recruiting has been so next level. Like, we're doing all this talk about Alabama's 2017 class, rightfully so. I believe, along with their 08 class, might be the best recruiting class anybody's ever seen in the rankings era. But these 2018, 2019, 2020 classes are really good too. Yeah. And until we see other teams start to recruit that way, it's going to be those teams. But food for thought here. If you're an FSU fan, right, or you're a North Carolina fan, or you're just a fan of a team that's not necessarily been in that playoff position here lately, Nick Saban got there by outworking people. And I believe college football is fun and cool in that way. In the NFL, you get 1 first-round draft pick. There's nothing to stop Mike Norvell from going to recruit 10, right, and sign 10. And if you can outwork people and you can convince them that your program is headed in the right direction, you can put them in the NFL, you're going to be great. And that's the thing about Tallahassee. You got all the tools. You got all the resources to be great there in a way that some other schools may not. So I believe there's an opportunity, but you're going to have to take advantage of it in 21 to be able to take advantage of it in 22, 23, and on down the line.
Good stuff, man. Well, I appreciate it, RJ. I appreciate your talking to us. And I know FSU fans are excited that somebody's showing a little bit of love, you know, even before it actually happens. So we'll see. And, you know, hopefully your words about Mike Norvell prove to be prophetic because Florida State really needs him to, you know, get this program back to where it has always been. It feels like a long time ago since Florida State's been a top 25 team. Like as you said, though, it's only really been 3 or 4 years. It hasn't been that long, but hopefully they can turn it around. But thanks again for taking the time. And I will make sure that when we put up the video, we put out your Twitter handle and YouTube links, everything, and get people to follow you on all of your different platforms. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ira. I appreciate you, man.
Talk soon.
All right.